Fresh and
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all of my buds, and today is a wonderful day. This is always one of my favorite episodes to do. It is a lore episode with Kale from DeadSummer Art, who is just the best, makes awesome content, and always willing to come on, be an awesome bud, and just chat about the lore of the upcoming set, which is Dusk Till Dawn. We're going to have a great chat today. We're going to get into the War of the Monarchs. We're getting into Leviathan, Jane, Bolton. It's going to be a good time. I even brought out my Lumina Go Boomina shirt, just to get into the spirit. It's going to be a great time, and we're going to throw it to the show here in a second. First, I want to shout out to the Patreon, who helps make this show happen, keeps the lights on, the mics hot. It is a great way to support the show. You can find it in the show notes. You get some extra bonus content and stuff like that, and some nice rewards. On top of that, check out the Buds Discord, which is a great place to hang out. That's also in the link tree below. If you're listening on Spotify or anything like that, give us a little review, all that fun stuff. And YouTube, we're almost at 500 subscribers, so I'll have to dress up and do cosplay as Adult Levi soon. Should be awesome. Just great. I can't wait. But there are other reasons to subscribe to the YouTube, because you get to watch this. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming out this summer, and the live podcast, The Bud Rush Bellow, that I do with Mr. Viz, aka Gary, on Wednesdays at 9:30 Eastern. And also, finally, want to shout out Greg, our producer, who's awesome. I'm sure he's very hyped for this episode as well.
Hey, Tommy, and welcome back to the show, Kale. Really glad you're here. It's always exciting when you're on, because that means a new set's coming out, which is great. And Tommy, I did have a question for you, though. I was on Discord, in the main purple Discord, and I saw that you posted something about Pat from Off the Rails TCG. What was it you called him?
Big guy. Now, before we throw it to Kale, stick around. Charmer is going to hop on at the end, and finally we're going to get to chat, just a real quick moment. So should be great, and everybody, please enjoy. Okay, we are here with Kale from DeadSummer Art, our dear friend, our dear bud, who likes to come on, before every set, so we can talk about some lore, about some flavor, and some stuff going on. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good at the moment. One thing I would like to say before we start, I think you've mentioned it on the podcast previous, but for those who don't know, you did recently propose to someone.
Yes, I did.
And I would like to congratulate you on that. Lady Fresh is becoming Mrs. Fresh, I guess.
Yeah.
So
yeah, thank you. It's funny. I mentioned it on the podcast with Rachel. Like right before I proposed, but I knew that the episode was coming out the day after, so I was like, I did it last night, but I realized I guess I haven't really talked about it on the podcast. But yes, she said yes, so it's pretty cool. But thank you, I appreciate that. But how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Keeping busy. Lots of things going on personally with like my gaming club and content, but I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that today. So
yeah, well then let's get right into it. Now, the gaming club you had talked about last time you were on, how is that going, and any progress there? Is it flourishing?
It's going pretty good. So we're still only really supporting a couple games at the moment, which is mostly the other card game that we won't talk about, Flesh and Blood and Warhammer 40k. It mostly relies on having people volunteering their time to run stuff for other game systems. But yeah, it's been going steady. I've been getting, I guess it's something we talk about, I've been getting a little bit down about it, mostly because a lot of the responsibility just is completely on my shoulders, and I'm feeling a little bit like some people, it's completely understandable, but some people in the club are not able to volunteer as much time to help run the events. So a lot of it's just been falling onto me, especially trying to get like money for people entering things like drafts in advance because the club doesn't have any capital. It doesn't have any funds of its own, really. I need those funds in advance to order the product. And at the moment, we have like a draft coming up for the other card game. And I have to buy those booster boxes, and I'm waiting on people to give me money. And I'm like, come on, I need the money. Like, I don't want this to come out of my own bank account, but I'm sort of having to take the brunt sometimes just to help things go along. I mean, people definitely do appreciate the effort that we put into the club, but it's a lot. I was kind of, I don't want to say forced into this position. It's all volunteer work, but I was kind of just pushed into the chairman position of the club, mostly because nobody else wanted to do it. I do know that if I weren't doing it, the club probably wouldn't be around. So I guess it's better that I do it, and have to carry those burdens than just not have a club at all. I definitely didn't want the community in my town to die. So it's the price you pay, I guess.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice, you got to make. But, to me, it sounds like any group project I ever had in high school, it's like, if I don't do all this work, I don't think it's going to get done. So I empathize with you, in terms of what you're going through. And I'm sure it's very tough, but hopefully it gets to a point where other people are going to want to kind of hop in. It's going to take for you, right, to maybe be on away on vacation for a weekend, and people are like, oh, what are we going to do?
Vacation. What is that? Never heard of it in my life.
Yeah, I know. I went on my first one ever, a couple weeks ago. It's and I was I don't know how to relax. But
yep. I'm a bit like that.
Yeah. So, I hope it kind of comes around to that point where other folks are going to have to realize they're going to have to step up. But it's still really awesome what you're doing, and like you said, you don't want it to die in your area. So it's puts you between a rock and a hard place. But how's everything else going with content? You just recorded something special. I know that.
I did. I definitely did. So the thing that we recorded, which, I mean, we've kind of, I guess, mentioned it on Twitter and stuff before. For those of you who don't know, I just have DM'd a session of Dungeons and Dragons, but set in the world of Flesh and Blood, with the guys from the Living Legends podcast. So that's Kale, Red Zone Rogue, Az from Go Again Gaming, and Bill from the Spike Feeders. I was trying to get it all within one sitting, but so far we only managed to get about halfway through my notes. I wrote a lot of notes. I spent so many hours on this. So far, the notes in total, I think my notes are about to hit 20 pages long.
Oh my God.
So that includes just session notes, descriptions, possible things they can do, stat blocks for enemies that they'll fight. So that's all encompassed within about 20 pages on a big Google Doc. But yeah, we only got about halfway through it, and it took us about 4 hours to do that. So it was a lot of fun. It went a lot smoother than I anticipated, which is good. But I was very happy with everyone's performance with their characters. All their characters are really cool. They had a great time sort of interacting with one another in the world. There was some combat as well. And I don't want to give away too much, but let's just say that Bill's character was a little bit of a goof, and ended up starting off the combat hiding under a ruined tent, all the canvas of the tent. He was hiding underneath it, prone, when the combat started. So he had to get up at the start of combat. But Kel from Red Zone Rogue, he was playing an assassin. Az was playing a ranger, of course. Yep. And Bill was playing a cleric. So it was very interesting. And yeah, Kel's character did a lot of damage in the very first turn of combat. That's what assassins do. He jumped out of the shadows and completely destroyed one of the people that they were fighting. So yeah, good times all around. But we're just planning out when the next session will be, and yeah, that will be when things get really, really exciting for the session. So,
well,
yeah, it went well.
I found that, especially in the past few years, like kind of D&D RPG kind of the content is so much fun to watch, especially when you have a good group. And obviously, you're probably. I mean, I'm assuming you're a great DM, and those guys are all great. They've all been on this show. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I can't wait because the World of Wraith is just prime for that kind of thing, right? And I don't know. How did you feel as a DM doing it in the World of Wraith?
I felt fairly comfortable. So one thing with D&D, whenever I play, is I like to homebrew stuff instead of using pre-written modules. And the biggest reason for me is that if I get to a point where somebody asks a question or goes somewhere that I'm not expecting, if it's a pre-written module, I don't feel comfortable making up stuff, because I feel like if they ask me a question and I give them an answer off the top of my head, later on down the line, I have to kind of stick to that, and that might not actually connect well with the pre-established lore that's in the module. Whereas in homebrew, if I say something, well, I just include it in my world,
It's canon.
It's like, what's over there? Oh, this thing's over there. Well, now it is,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I felt fairly comfortable, but I did also at the start of the session have a disclaimer where I said that this is a work of fiction, and I did my best to try stick to pre-established lore. But at the end of the day, if I needed something that wasn't available already from LSS, I just came up with it myself. So just for background, it was set in the pits, and we don't know too many locations in the pits. We don't quite know how the tunnel systems work. And the party is traveling to the Southmore Asylum, which is where Dr. Mortimer is currently sort of heading up experiments and stuff. That's also where he took Arachne in the solitary confinement version of Arachne. So I ended up having to make my own entire floor plan for Southmore Asylum because they have to go into it. And there's no map of Southmore that LSS has released. So that was all just completely off the top of my head. I'm like, this makes sense, so I'm just going to do it. And yeah, I'm excited for when they actually sort of get into it. They've just sort of reached the outskirts of Southmore at the end of the first part. So the second part, they'll be trying to infiltrate a mental institution. And yeah, that'll be really fun. So
Yeah, well, I'm excited to watch it, and hopefully LSS watches it and it's like, oh, well, we'll just add this to our world now too. It's like, oh,
that would be such an honor if they did that. That's kind of, I'm not expecting it to ever happen, but if there ever comes a point where LSS takes something that I've done and includes it in the game somehow, I'll just be over the moon.
Yeah.
Like a little nod to something I've done. That'd be sick.
Now, speaking of something you've done, especially since we last chatted, and you were working on this at the time, but you had the opportunity to spoil Codex of Inertia for outsiders. And, video was awesome. As always, if you're not watching DeadSummer Art's spoiler videos every set, it's just like the best ones. They're awesome. You get all the flavor, and it's really well done. And hopefully you get enough time to work on it this time, for Dusk Till Dawn. I can't wait to see what you get for Dusk Till Dawn. How was the process to work on Codex of Inertia? Because in a lot of ways, like we had seen Codex of Frailty, but Codex of Inertia was also another card that was unlike anything we've really seen, even lore-wise, at the time.
Yeah, so it was quite, I don't want to say it was super different, but it was different to what I'd done previously. So this was the first spoiler season that Alex was the community manager, sort of managing all the spoilers for. And he did a fantastic job at providing me with like a ton of assets. I got a bunch of artwork from cards that hadn't been shown at the time. Not only my card, but cards like Infectious Host, which was that generic where if you have a token and it hits, you give them all the tokens you've got. So I had artwork from that to work with. He gave me a direction that he would like to see the video go in, which is what I ended up doing because I thought it was good. He was like, we want to give you a bunch of information on the diseases of the pits, and we want you to just talk about the origins of all these diseases. So he gave me a ton of lore. It was like a good couple paragraphs. There's like a paragraph for each of the diseases and then like sprinkling in other pieces as well. And it was like really sort of natural to come up with a script for the video and still give some lore that, you know, wasn't already known at the time, which was really cool. So yeah, it was a really fun video to make. I went all out on like trying to up my animation game of the artwork, you know, do some extra editing flair, and it turned out to be probably one of my best videos I've ever made, I'd say.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I mean, I even rewatched it, you know, when I was getting ready for the podcast. It's like, man, because like it's like, oh man, like, you know, I get a little bit jealous. I'm like, you know, how does he knock it out of the park every single time? But so and like another thing about like Codex of Inertia, sure, it might not be as powerful as Frailty, and you know, Codex of Bloodrot's doing its own thing, but there's something about the blue that they use for the Inertia, like in all the art of like Outsiders, that really just, I think aesthetically is so cool. Like even laced with Inertia, you know, it is just so neat to see like on the card. It's so, the contrast of the blues with all the dark colors is awesome. And
yeah, it really pops.
Yeah, and Codex of Inertia is like, in my opinion, the best looking of the three. And obviously it looked great like on the big screen with the full art. So now, speaking of Outsiders, you know, before we get into the War of the Monarchs, which is what we're going to be talking about, let's get your overall takes on the set, because, you know, it was a big swing from LSS, in my opinion. Like, you know, the pits are a lot different than anything we've seen in the game outside of like, you know, the Azalea stuff and like the original Arachne stuff. And it could have gone any different way, because like the pits have like a lot of the gang stuff going on, and then like obviously the disease stuff. What were your takes on, you know, the flavor, the lore, the gameplay of Outsiders?
Yeah, I think overall the set was pretty good. There are a few bits and pieces that I wasn't 100% with. But I think in terms of like gameplay, knocked it out the park. It was really fun to play limited for Outsiders. Just the fact that they had the hybrid class cards just made it so much more interesting whenever you were trying to decide what you wanted to pick in like a draft. So that was really good fun. All the heroes were balanced. I love the fact that they had 2 heroes per class, so you could really try and generally get a card pool that was quite flexible, and then towards the end you could really narrow down your choice. Whereas I think in a lot of other sets it's a lot more rigid. Like you're kind of locked in by the time you're like finished with pack 1. In terms of flavor and lore, the flavor was like really good. I do think they kind of dropped the ball a little bit in terms of lore. So the stories that we did get were like 10 out of 10, but we didn't get, and this is my specific gripe, and I know a lot of other people had this gripe too, we don't know why Katsu and Benji were in the pits. What are they doing? They were just sort of like, hello, and then that's it. You know, we knew they had ties to Uzuri, but like, what do they do? You know, and we did get like some story about, say, like Riptide, but I believe off the top of my head that story that we got wasn't necessarily like an origin story. It was more like him just doing stuff. You know, I want to know how exactly he became very grotesque. You know, we didn't get any of that, so I felt like what they did release was really good, but they kind of didn't release enough. I know it's hard to do that, but I will say though, I'll give props to the team. There was a part of the lore that they released that I found to be a little bit weird the way they wrote it. So for those who don't know, there was a scene in one of the stories where Uzuri gets like jumped at a bar by like this rival gang. And there's one part where she's performing like this sort of maneuver to like stab this guy. And I have to describe the way that she was positioned. So she was positioned in such a way that she was stabbing the guy from the groin upwards while kind of positioned above him. And they mentioned specifically that she shoved her butt in the guy's face, which was just like, it was like this awesome fight scene. And then there's just like her butt in this guy's face. And I was like I guess if you're trying to describe it, but then I was like, we're talking about it in like the lore channels of the official Discord. And I was like, you could have just written it this way, you know, and I rewrote it and I was like, this is much better, but it doesn't seem as like, it's not that it was necessarily sexual, but like, it was just such an odd way to describe the scene. And I was like, did you really have to like reference that? After posting about it on Twitter, a couple days later, they went and changed it. So I was like, that's really good. Like they're listening to the community. They're willing to like tweak the story if, you know, people sort of go, oh, it didn't quite hit the mark there. So that's really good. They definitely seem to be listening to the community, and I hope that they are also listening to our pleas to know why Katsu and Benji are in the pits. Please just tell us. I want to know what's going on. What have they done? You know, maybe they're waiting for like another pit set or a mysterious set where Katsu comes back and they talk about what he did in the pits. But yeah. So overall, the set, I'd probably give it like a 8 out of 10.
Okay.
It's definitely up there in terms of sets. So
yeah, and like, you know, it seems like we got a lot of year one stories, right? We did not get the year zeros for especially Riptide. I mean, that was one that I read multiple times, which was like such a cool story, and he kind of just hints to his past on you know, as a seafaring, you know, kind of pirate. Or whatever, swashbuckler. And, you know, we don't know exactly what he's doing, but, you know, it'd been kind of like, why do you look like this, Riptide? Like, what's going on? You know? And,
what happened to your arm, bro?
Yeah, like... And,
I do have my theories on that, but...
Yeah, and like, it is funny that you brought up the Katsu and Benji thing, because when we found out that Katsu and Benji were in the set, I think we all just were like, oh, and then we saw the Mysteria border on Uzuri, young Uzuri. And I think everybody was like, just in our minds, like, oh, they're coming to find Uzuri or whatever. But in my mind, we all thought that, and like we just made it canon in our heads, and we never actually got any kind of literature on it. And you just reminded me now that, oh, we don't know exactly why, which is kind of funny. So there is definite ties to between Uzuri and Katsu. I will say that there is some lore that I've been given. I was made privy to by someone in the community, not LSS, but they were sent it by LSS. And I won't go too deep into it, but it is confirmed that Uzuri and Katsu do have a connection. Okay.
But yeah, as to why Katsu is now seeking out Uzuri, you know, your guess is as good as mine. So,
yeah, in my mind, Katsu and like Benji's just like Katsu's like little like the Robin to his Batman, and they're just like running around doing some crazy stuff.
It's really cool, but you know, it kind of feels a little bit like they were like, oh, we want to put these characters in the set for gameplay. Now we need to come up with a reason as to why they're there lore-wise, but they didn't quite do that. But you know, it's not the end of the world. It's whatever. So
there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot, and I'm sure you know, like LSS likes to do, everything will come to light at some point where, you know, they'll just drop something huge, or it will be the next set or something like that. We might not even get a supplemental set again for a while, so we might just get another draft set with some ninja stuff going on. So we'll see. Now, Before we get to the War of the Monarchs, I'd like to do the fresh faves. Obviously, you've been on for, multiple times at this point. So we're just going to do Outsiders fresh faves because it's, last set since we last talked. So let's do it. Who in Outsiders was your favorite hero?
So from a lore perspective, definitely Arachne. However, from gameplay, I wasn't really feeling any of the heroes.
Interesting.
I definitely looked at Arachne first, just because I do really like Arachne. He's like one of my favorite heroes. But I felt like because his card is strictly young hero, I don't really play Blitz that much, nor like if I am going to play a young hero, it's going to be in Commoner. And I just felt like his deck that you'd want to build around his ability is a little bit too straightforward to me. Like there's not too much room. It's for like experimentation. I mean, it's your first stealth card gets go again. So obviously what do? You put stealth cards into your deck. That's kind of it, It's like, what else do you go from there, like gameplay wise, like Uzuri's really cool, but I felt like they're very similar to Dorinthia, where they will pub stomp people that don't understand how the deck works. But if you understand how the deck works, like they become a lot easier to verse. And a lot of the cards that you do want to put into Uzuri, like Command and Conquer, I don't have too many of. So I was like, budget-wise, I'll just stick with Arachne Huntsman. Rangers are cool, but I don't really have anything Ranger-wise. I'd maybe play Riptide. I really do like traps, but I didn't feel like it was that strong. And then the ninjas, they're the same ninjas that we've had for a while, and I haven't really played much of them. I've played a little bit of Benji, which is really cool, but I guess the only thing that I really connected with Hero was just Arachne. I really loved his story for what happened to him in Southmore and the whole thing with Dr. Mortimer and whatnot. So he's my favorite, but the others I was a little bit on, but lore-wise they're all pretty cool. So
yeah. I mean, Arachne is very straightforward. Something that like I had talked about a Vinset. I don't know if it was, to be honest, I don't know if it was with Gary or Sin, but Vinset's a expert level hero, right? Some very complicated text going on with that hero. Now, Arachne, Solitary Confinement, beginner level, right?
Yes.
Stealth card, go again, go. That's it. And have fun. Put a bunch of zero cost like redline stuff and have a ball. But yeah, I can understand. It's not the most exciting, but like it is a really neat young hero. So, what was your favorite weapon from the set?
My favorite weapon from the set is Nerve Scalpel. And the biggest reason why is for an equipment, which we'll probably talk about next, which is Flick Knives. Because with Nerve Scalpel, the way the timing works is if you attack and then somebody blocks and you do all that, and then they defense react. In response to that, you can actually Flick Knives your Nerve Scalpel and have that resolve first. And then once that layer resolves and you go to the defense reaction is now -1 defense. So unlike things like Spider's Bite or Obitoclast, or even the Scale Peeler, I guess, by the time you Flick Knives one of those to try lower the defense, it's already too late because they've become a defending card. But defense reactions only become defending when they resolve. So that's just such a neat interaction. I really love that. I've had some great turns with Arachne where I'm like, man, this really needs to hit, and they've just sink below. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pop my Nerve Scalpel, just throw it at him, and it's gotten me the hit. And then from there, my turns have just kept going, and it's been really bad for my opponents. Plus, I mean, the flavor is just really cool. It screams Dr. Mortimer and Southmore Asylum, which I'm a huge fan of, obviously. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love, and I'm assuming this is the answer for the next. Your favorite equipment? it's Flick Knives, right?
It is. I do have other equipment that we could talk about as well.
Okay. Well, no, I just want to talk about flick knives like for a second.
Sure.
And like this is something I actually brought up with Brian Gottlieb a couple weeks ago. This card is design wise like one of my favorite cards, maybe in the game, because it's like, you know, they asked the question, we want to throw these daggers and these knives. How do we do that? And they designed the card, and it just feels so right. It feels exactly like how you would imagine throwing the knives would be in the game. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like one of the biggest things that I always focus on when it comes to card games of any type is the dichotomy between flavor and function, where you want a card to do something, but you also want it to be quite flavorful. And that is often hard because a lot of the time gameplay has to come first. You can't just have something be very flavorful all the time because sometimes it will just break how the game works. But this is like it is the gold standard for how a card should be, because flavor and function just work so perfectly together. It's like chef's kiss, you know?
Oh, yeah.
It's awesome. But I guess in terms of other equipment, the other two that I could think of was Mask of Many Faces. That artwork is awesome. And I love the idea of just like naming a card and just the complex rules interactions you can have with that. And Toxic Tips, just because it's a good card. You know, if I wasn't running flick knives, I'd be running Toxic Tips. And it looks really cool in cold foil as well. I just like the whole disease thing where you can just like pop it and add an extra on hit to an attack that normally wouldn't be something they would consider blocking, and all of a sudden you're just forcing them to consider it, which is hand disruption in a way, you know, which is always good. So
yeah, no, Toxic Tips is awesome. Now, what is your favorite run-of-the-mill card? You know, attack actions, non-attack actions, etc.
Yeah. So I guess gameplay perspective wise, I would say any of the Daggers Matters cards. So things like Concealed Blade, Stab Wound, Hurl, Bleed Out, Knives Out, all of those cards. I love it because it's like this whole sub archetype, I guess, for both Assassin and Ninja, where you're just all about your daggers. It's a shame that archetype sucks at the moment, at least. You know, I would really want to play like a dagger assassin, but it doesn't really work. It's probably more of a ninja thing with like Benji, just because cards like Stab Wound is like a 2-power attack, which Benji can allow to hit, and then it has an on hit where if it hits, they lose life equal to the amount of times daggers have hit, yada yada. But yeah, it's a very flavorful mechanic, so I really like that. In terms of lore, Burdens of the Past is such a really cool card because that shows Arachne sort of battling the mental demons he's had from all the time that he spent with Dr. Mortimer. And it even shows Dr. Mortimer. It's one of the 2 cards that actually shows Dr. Mortimer. So you can kind of see his creepy face with the scalpels, sort of, you know, picking apart Arachne. So that's just such a cool card as well. I don't think it's that useful because I don't think too many heroes, at least at the moment now that Oldhim's gone as well, run more than 10 defense reactions and would have all of them in the graveyard at the same time. But still a cool card.
Well, it all depends on if Riptide becomes
that's true. Yeah.
You know, and I've been playing a lot of Riptide, and I do worry about Birds of the Past sometimes. I'm like, they're not playing it right. That would be crazy, and then you just never know. But no, that's an awesome answer. And with that, we say goodbye to Outsiders in a way. We don't really say goodbye to Outsiders. We still playing it.
It's still around.
Around. But for the purpose of our conversation, we are saying goodbye to Outsiders, and we're saying hello to Dusk Till Dawn and really the main star of the show here, the War of the Monarchs, right? So Monarch, the set, kind of set the stage for what we're about to see, right? Light versus shadow. That's basically what it is. So like, I wanted to get your perspective and your kind of expertise here, and what you knew about the War of the Monarchs. So first of all, what is this war?
So in order to really discuss what the war is and what's happening at the moment, we do kind of have to rewind to the history of Wraith a little bit. So long time ago, the old ones attacked Wraith. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm going to say Aesir, Embra, and Old Ones. These are words I'm going to say. They may seem confusing as to what exactly they are. Don't worry, I am also confused. They haven't really clarified exactly what all these things are because they are related in a way. But hopefully we get some further clarification on that. So these Old Ones attacked Wraith, seemingly from outside the normal realm of reality. And they were beaten back. So these Old Ones are like a bunch of monsters, demons. They were beaten back by the Olin, which Oldhim is one. And they were also helped by the Ancients, which were like these big ancient elementals that roamed Wraith. So that happened ages ago. During part of this time as well, there was Solana was being created. And when Solana was created, there was the first Grand Magister that sort of helped build Solana, was called the Devout. That was his title. He sort of helped bring everyone together to worship an Aesir called Sol. So we actually got confirmation 100% that Sol is the Aesir of light. Aesir being these like very powerful beings, almost I guess like demigods or gods. It's hard to say exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the Devout made Solana, and then something happened where he started not liking the fact that a lot of the people were following Solana and not really questioning it, like Sol itself, I should say. So he started looking into things that would be considered heretical, things that went against Sol and the teachings of Sol. And he decided that Sol wasn't really good. So basically he came to the conclusion that Aesir are not good in general, specifically Sol. So a lot of the other people within Solana caught wind of this, and they were like, that's heresy. We don't like that. Yeah. So they went and killed specifically 13. I'm sure this number probably is important, but they killed 13 of his closest, I guess, disciples. And then they banished the first Grand Magister from Solana. So he went to a island off the shore of Wraith, and he decided to make Solana V2, essentially. Mm-hmm. This ended up becoming what we now know as the Demonastery, where he would be free to learn the true secrets of Wraith and learn about the forbidden realm known as Eorathiel, which is like a mirror reflection of Wraith. It's like an alternate dimension. So he did that, and a bunch of like-minded individuals, like the disciples he had, also came to the Demonastery and started researching as well. Now, obviously, Solana didn't like this. They considered all of this heresy. So they sent a bunch of soldiers to the Demonastery to go deal with the Devout, which at this point was now called the Apostate, I believe was the title. So they obviously had this big fight on the island, and during sort of a desperate moment, the Apostate imbued the mansion of the Demonastery with, they literally said this in the story, his flesh and blood. Ooh. And his life force.
Okay.
And he became one with the Demonastery, and at the same time tore it from Wraith in terms of reality. So at this point in time, the Demonastery is in a liminal space between Wraith and Eorathiel. So it's not really on either. It's kind of in between.
Interesting.
So if you were to try, say, for example, if we plonked you, Tommy, on Wraith and we said, go find the Demonastery, and you knew that it was on an island, you could search all of the seas and you would never find it.
Oh, wow.
But it does technically kind of exist. It's almost like a mirage in a way, is the way I see it. So that there was the beginnings of the war between light and shadow, which ended up becoming the War of the Monarchs. So over time, there were more Grand Magisters, and there were more attacks from the monastery on Solana because they believed that Sol is bad, Sol is evil, it should be abolished. They believed that Sol was kind of brainwashing the people of Wraith and that its influence was overall a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
All these attacks ended up falling short. They never really accomplished what they wanted to because they weren't a proper fighting force. They weren't united. Fast forward quite a bit of time. This was actually centuries ago, which makes me believe that Grand Magisters live for a very long time.
Yeah,
because we're currently on the 5th Grand Magister, so either they live a long time or there is a big period of time between like the 2nd and 3rd Grand Magister, for example. So fast forward a couple of centuries to present day. They had a group called the Disciples of Pain go to the monastery. So the Disciples of Pain, which is the group that Chain belongs to, is 100% on board with the apostates' view on the Aesir. They believe that the best way to solve this issue is to wipe out Solana and just make the world a clean slate.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, just wipe the slate clean, restart. We don't want these Aesir. These Aesir are bad for whatever reason. So, Chain's group, they begin preparing and performing rituals to open what's called the Dimensional Gateway. Okay. Dimensional spelt with 2 X's because that's really cool. So, after a long time, they eventually get to the point where they're like, okay, we are ready to open up this gateway. Around about this time, there was a man that had fled to the monastery from the Northern Realms, which the Northern Realms is like an area surrounding, it's like an area near Solana that's kind of under its control.
Mm-hmm.
There was a man that fled from there to the monastery named Lord Sutcliffe. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that man.
I've heard of this guy.
Yeah. A bit of a rabble-rouser. I'd really like to know his first name at some point. That'd be cool. But anyway, he fled because he was doing similar things to what the apostate was previously doing centuries ago in Solana. He was looking at forbidden knowledge and information because he himself wanted to have something called Aether Affinity. Aether Affinity is kind of hereditary, kind of not, but basically it allows people to cast spells. So if you want to be a wizard and cast magic, you need to have Aether Affinity.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. There's an exception to that rule, kind of.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. So he goes through the monastery and he's doing some research. And at some point, somehow, a body washes up on the shore of the monastery. This body he took in and began performing some more experiments on. So he was performing a lot of experiments trying to give someone who doesn't have Aether Affinity the capability to weave magic because that's all he ever wanted.
Yeah.
So he finds this body and he's like, wow, new test subject, wee-hee. So he grabs them and begins performing experiments on them and finds that they're quite resilient to a lot of the work that he does on them because previously he would perform like surgeries and stuff on test subjects and they would just straight up die. Anytime he would try to imbue them with Aether, it would overload their system and they would just straight up die. But this individual did not. So he speculated that this individual, who he was pretty sure came from Volcor, had some sort of latent Aether Affinity capabilities. So he eventually took an object, and I don't know how he got it, but he took an object known as the Arknight Shard and embedded it into this corpse. And upon doing so, the corpse came back to life, I don't know what you'd call it at this point. And he named his creation Viserai. So that's how we got the hero Viserai, obviously. So he now had a new puppet, a new plaything that he could boss around and get him to do his dirty work. So for those who don't know, the monastery, whilst it is a safe haven for people to research whatever they want, the people that go there for obvious reasons are not the nicest.
Yeah.
So they will oftentimes kill each other to steal their research. So Lord Sutcliffe, just being previously was just a noble, he didn't have any fighting capabilities or anything, now had this bodyguard. So he would send him off to go do some errands. Now, Viceroy, being very confused as to who he was, he had lost all memories of his past life, was an easy target for people like the Disciples of Pain and the other residents of the monastery to start to manipulate. And eventually, over time, they manipulated Viceroy in such a way that he turned on Lord Sutcliffe. And with a swing of the Nebula Blade, cut Lord Sutcliffe's head off and declared that he had no more masters. Whether or not he is technically free at this point is up for debate. Because he was manipulated into doing this. Now, there was an entity that was speaking to him as part of this manipulation called Whisper. I actually found out somewhat recently as well that they have a title. So their name is Whisper, the Font of Lies.
Oh.
And that is actually shown in the concept art section of the lore book. But basically what Whisper is this sentient stained glass window that is in one of the main halls of the monastery. And it kind of depicts a girl, I believe. And it was talking to Viceroy, saying, beware the man born into power, he who even now seeks to rival the Aesir themselves. And he thought at this point it was Lord Sutcliffe. But afterwards he finds that it wasn't really Lord Sutcliffe, and the Disciples of Pain end up using Viceroy, now that Lord Sutcliffe is out of the picture, to become a conduit of some sort for this ritual that they had been preparing for so long to do. Viceroy wasn't particularly happy with this, so he killed a bunch of people as part of this ritual, and even pulled out one of the cultists' spines and, using his Aether abilities, turned it into the Reaping Blade. So the Reaping Blade is actually the spine of a cultist, which is really cool.
That's very cool.
But he also went and shattered the stained glass window that held Whisper. And through this and the blood that he had spilt and the ritual that happened, he opened the dimensional gateway to Eorathiel. So Chain was actually there at the point that this happened. We didn't know at the time because all these events happened during Crucible of War when that set came out. And it wasn't until Monarch that we saw Chain was actually there. So Chain is kind of manipulating Viceroy from the shadows to open this. So anyway, everyone in the monastery is very happy because now they can go to the Forbidden Realm that they had been studying for so long. So Chain, with a few other people, goes into Eorathiel, and it's this dark, desolate, shadowy wasteland, just like a reflection of Wraith. And he goes and seeks out the Emperor. So the Emperor are, I believe they're kind of, in terms of hierarchy, if you have the Aesir at the very top of power, the Emperor would be below that, and then the Old Ones in general would be below the Emperor. So the Emperor seem to be able to command the lower Old Ones, but they themselves, the Emperor, are also considered Old Ones. It's very vague, as I said. And Chain finds one of them. This one is called Ursa, the Soul Reaper. And he makes a pact because he thinks by taking the power of the Emperor and making a pact with them, that will give him the strength to go and destroy Solana and free all of Wraith from the influence of Soul. So he makes this pact. The only thing Ursa wants in return is Chain's soul, as a higher being of nefariousness would often want.
Understandable.
But yeah, understandable, from the guy called the Soul Reaper. So he makes this pact with Ursa, and he begins preparing an invasion force to take on Solana. Now, a bit earlier, so if we rewind a little bit, you will like this part of the story because this part of the story refers to Levia. So, yeah, I knew you'd like that. So, Levia funnily enough, also from the Northern Realms. A lot of bad people come from the Northern Realms, except for Bolton. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Levia, long story cut short, she was a sort of a house slave to a noble in the Northern Realms called Lady Barthelmot. Lady Barthelmot ended up not being a nice person and was making dark deals with shadowy entities. And she treated Levia really poorly. So Levia, to sort of get revenge on Lady Barthelmot and to free herself from her enslavement, began watching what Lady Barthelmot was doing and then did it for herself. And through doing this, she ended up making whether or not she kind of knew what she was doing is up for debate, but she ended up making a deal with what turned out to be another Emperor, this one called Blasmafet, the Soul Harvester. And this gave her extraordinary powers. She became like a monster, big tentacles, etc., etc. She killed Lady Barthelmot. Now, as she was going through the Barthelmot estate, just slaughtering people and eating their remains, as you do, she came across a man that said that she had kind of ruined his plan with Lady Barthelmot because he had something he wanted to do with her, but said that Levia herself could probably be a good replacement. Now, Levia wasn't having any of this and just straight up killed the man, tore his heart out and literally ate his heart. But the man was holding this strange pendant, and the pendant had some like engravings on it. But essentially what it was an invitation to the demonastery. So she took this pendant and found this one area. We don't actually know where it is. It might have been within Lady Barthelmot's estate, but it was guarded by a gargoyle. And upon using this pendant where this gargoyle was, it opened a portal gateway to the demonastery, because at this point you can't access it from Wraith.
Yeah.
So she had to use a special portal. So she goes to the demonastery. She ends up finding Lord Sutcliffe. Well, his head was kept alive by the Disciples of Pain because Lord Sutcliffe knew a lot. And then from there, ended up going to this weird sort of realm where there was lots of flesh and like meat, and it was very strange fever dream. I don't quite remember a lot of the story because this came out maybe about 2 years ago. But afterwards, when she returned to the estate through the same portal, she ended up running into Chain. And it turns out that Chain was kind of the person she killed, but also wasn't. It's very weird. It seems like Chain was using some sort of like illusory, strange, shadowy magic to disguise himself.
Mm-hmm.
But the person ended up being Chain and was basically like, Are you like satiated, just like killing random people and eating their remains? I've got a better idea. Come join me. We're going to go kill Solana. So Levia was like, okay, I'm going to go with you and do that. So now at this point in time, we have 2 people with pacts made to Embra and a bunch of demons and nasty people at the demonastery getting ready to attack Solana. So over in Solana, we have 2 people. Their backstories don't matter too much in this regard, but we have Prism, who is an illusionist and brings to life the stories of the heralds that came to Solana as emissaries of Sol. And we also have Bolton, who was probably the only nice person we know of that came from the Northern Realms.
Yeah.
Because everyone else went to the demonastery, so.
Well, you know, I mean, I think Leviathan is just very misunderstood, and Chain is just a manipulator and, you know, manipulated his way to living legend, but, you know, it is what it is.
Sure, and we'll get to the ethics of the demonastery later. But Bolton saw a lot of the heretical stuff that was being done within Solana's sort of borders and didn't like it whatsoever. So he vowed to sort of protect Solana from the shadow. Now, during one of the failed attacks by the demonastery, his wife, Irina, ended up perishing. And this obviously made him very sad. So he went to one of his friends, who her name was Minerva Themis, and she is the owner of the Golden Chariot Inn in Solana. But she's actually secretly a secret agent. So she, yeah, I know, right? Shocking. So it's a very classic trope, the bartender sort of being the spy master.
Yeah.
But Minerva explained that she was a part of the Gemini, which are Solana's like top secret operators. Think Black Ops military type stuff. And she said, look, become an inquisitor and you can help me track down the heretics and protect Solana before it's attacked again. So these are our two main people from Solana. I will also say at this point, there is another person, which is Shiana, the shapeshifter. She does also play a role in the War of the Monarchs, but I'll get to her in a little bit. So the Demonastery begins their attack on Solana. This time, full force. They've got 2 Emperor by their side, some powerful people. It's getting wacky, right? So during a battle that Dorinthia and Bolton are fighting in, Minerva, who is also good friends with Dorinthia because Minerva was good friends with Dorinthia's parents, she ends up getting killed/kidnapped by a necromancer, which the sound of that will probably excite a lot of people. Necromancer confirmed. But basically, this necromancer kind of kills Minerva and kidnaps her and takes her through a portal. And this causes Dorinthia to be very angry. She kind of ascends to become a light warrior, not really confirmed, but she gets this big burst of power and she fights demons. So there's this big battle that happens. At this time as well, Shiana travels from Solana to surrounding regions to ask for help because they are currently under attack. This is big war. Shiana goes to Volcor, and her specific goal is to plead to the Emperor of Volcor, please help us, we're dying. This will be bad if they kill us. Trust us, you know. However, by the time she gets there, she does have a run-in with Icelander, but that doesn't really matter for this story. By the time she gets to the Emperor has been assassinated by Arachne.
Yep.
So that threw a big spanner in her works. So she's like, well, there goes that plan. So clearly Volcor's got a bit more going on at the moment. They're currently in the midst of a civil war, and the Emperor has just died, and the volcano's erupting and lava's spilling through the streets. So she's like, all right, I'm going to come back to you guys later.
Good call.
So, good call, yep. So she returns to Solana and she goes to the High Council. I've forgotten the name of the High Council. I'd have to look at it, but it's basically this High Council that is full of magisters, not the Grand Magister. I think maybe the Grand Magister is kind of a part of it, but it's a whole council. And she explains the situation. She's like, the Emperor is dead. And this news should not have traveled faster than Shiana, but the council says, yeah, we know, which is very odd. So it's almost like they intentionally were a part of that whole scheme that goes into the Outsiders storyline. And then they kind of, we don't know exactly what happens, but they kind of brainwash Shiana in a way to stop her from asking more questions. So one thing that you'll notice in this whole storyline is that Solana does not like it when you ask questions. Doing so is heretical and obviously punished by death or being exiled, as a lot of the people in the Demonastery have been. So that's currently what's really happening with the War of the Monarchs. So we've got these two sides. The Demonastery has made their attack onto Solana. They have opened up the dimensional gateway, and the horrors from Irathiel, the old ones, are spilling back into Wraith. So that's pretty much where we're at the moment. That's where we left off with Monarch. There are other little bits and pieces in between that. So, for example, Oldhim, he was frozen during the final battle for Wraith back in the day, when the old ones previously invaded Wraith in force, and he thawed out, and he kind of sensed that the old ones were coming back. So he was going around trying to find people to help him. We don't exactly know how, but fast forward, Oldhim, Lexi, and Briar, which are all part of the same adventuring group, have made their way to Solana, along with Bravo as well. They've also recruited Bravo. So on the Solana side, we have that group plus Prism, Bolton, Dorinthia, and Shiana. So pretty stacked cast on that side. And then obviously on the other side, we have Chain and Levia. Now we also have a new character which we don't know too much about at the moment called Vincent, which I am head over heels in love with. She's queen.
I am not surprised, Kale, at all.
She is awesome. I love her vibe so much. And just as a random tangent design-wise, I really love the fact that they are not afraid to break, I guess, tropes with design of their characters, because this is a female that is, at least in the young artwork, completely bald, which she has no hair, which is quite a bold, lack of a better term, bold choice of LSS in terms of design, but they really pulled it off. You know, I love the fact that they're not afraid to sort of break tropes when it comes to design. They could have easily just made her like a beautiful woman in the conventional sense where she has long hair and, you know, looks very emo. But I really love what they did. You know, she's got all these pins and needles sort of sticking out of her. But the only information we know about her so far is that she was also a part of the Disciples of Pain, along with Chain, and is kind of, I don't know if they meant this literally or just kind of figuratively, because Chain went into Living Legend and this is the new Shadow Runeblade. But she is, to an extent, a disciple of Chain and has learned from Chain.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And the stuff that she's been taught has allowed her to gain the ability called rune gating, which basically allows her to summon things from Eorathiel into reality. And we do know as well that she also made a pact with a Embra. This one is called Nazreth the Soul Harrower. So as you can see, very on theme in terms of name. So there's also this extra Shadow Runeblade now that's also on the side of the Demonastery. And I guess outside of that, there's not too much else that we know of so far, at least at this point of recording. We're recording this on the 19th of June, my time. Your time too, actually.
Yeah, both of our time.
Yeah. And that's basically it. We do see that Prism has kind of done some stuff. She seems to be the young version of the new Prism is called Prism Advent of Thrones. So to break that name down, Advent means the arrival of something. Now, thrones could be taken literally in terms of monarchy. So maybe somehow Prism becomes like royalty. Although she isn't a royal hero, which kind of, I guess, would be a flavor fail in that sense.
Well, I guess
but thrones
maybe she could be Grand Magistrate, right? You know, kind of ascend to that role.
That would be crazy if that happened. Yeah, 'cause, the Grand Magister is not really royalty. They're more like the Pope, which you wouldn't consider the Pope royalty, but they're definitely important in terms of religious figures.
Yeah.
But thrones can also refer to angels. So it makes more sense that it's the arrival of angels. So up until now, Prism, whenever she made her illusions, like any other illusionist that we've seen so far, and it's kind of a core thing for the illusionists, they bring stories to life. And Prism had read up and found stories on the heralds of Solana. There's 8 of them. And had turned them sort of into physical manifest forms. And it seems now, at least from the fact that we've seen Soraya and Bologna as actual ally cards, that these heralds are actually physically returning in a sense. So it definitely seems like Prism's current power is she's returned these angels somehow, I guess in a similar way to how the Demonastery is summoning like old ones and demons and stuff, that Prism is kind of summoning these angels. And then her adult form, which we've only just now seen artwork of.
Yeah.
There was like an Armory poster that got released, I think today actually, that shows a bit of the artwork. But the name is called Prism Awakener of Soul, which is that implies a lot.
Yeah.
That implies that the Aesir, which are kind of dormant from what we know, that Prism has just been like, hey, big man in the sky, wake up, we need you at this point. So she is directly at this point communicating with an Aesir, which we've only seen one other person do that, and that was the Emperor of Volcor with the Aesir of Fire that lives under Mount Volcor. That's basically the storyline in a nutshell. Hopefully I didn't ramble too long on that.
No,
it's a lot to get through. Yeah.
It's so cool because like it's really setting up the stage for Dusk Till Dawn, right? and like, you know, probably a lot of the information that we're going to get in the coming weeks. And, you know, right, there's a lot of questions about Vincent at this point. Clearly, disciple of pain, and it makes sense in every sense of the way. I mean, the needles in her arms, and I'm assuming that we seen the adult version of Vincent yet? Was that the one with the shield, or do we not know?
So we've seen artwork on an armory poster, and it seems like she has a shield. I am begging to LSS, please let her be a tank rune blade, like a control rune blade. She kind of seems maybe like her ability is kind of like that, but I really hope she gets a shield. It did look like a shield.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't actually know Vincent's adult version name. She is confirmed to have an adult version, but yeah, we just don't know the name of it yet. I'm hoping something along the lines of like Vincent Corpse Puppet or something along those lines. She seems very like puppetry like. I mean, she has like all these like pins like a voodoo doll in her in the young art, and then the adult art, it seems like she has like wire or string coming from like her mouth, like she's been stitched. It's very odd. Yeah.
I mean, it's so cool flavor wise, and you know, we'll see where her story brings her, especially because they're gonna. I mean, Chain's going to be a part of it, but then I think they're going to departure from Chain a little bit, just because obviously they didn't reprint a new Chain; they just made a new Shadow Rune Blade
that we've seen.
That's true. That we've seen.
Anything could happen.
This is definitely all on like the information we have currently. So
yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Oldham kind of getting this band of characters together, and we actually just saw the trailer for like the LSS. Alex made a great video for a card called United We Stand. So basically the card depicts the whole cast of characters, all the Arya crew plus Bolton. I believe was Prism in the picture.
Yeah, so everyone fighting on the side of Solana is in it.
Yeah, so. And basically, if these characters are in your party, these heroes are in your party. I think it's the Unity mechanic. You get whatever kind of token for whichever hero is in your party. So this obviously, PvE is coming because that's the only thing that makes sense. And what a better way to kind of kick it off with this huge storyline of the War of the Monarchs. Now, what are your takes on this kind of hint at the PvE gameplay?
I know James has gone on record a couple times to try and quell rumors and sort of dull expectations a little bit because we were getting very hyped. I'm pretty certain he said it wasn't coming this year.
Okay.
But I mean, it seems like it's right on the cusp because they just released this card that is essentially completely useless until PvE comes out. And it's like, are they going to have a card be pretty much useless until 9 months from now when it comes out? Maybe rules wise, it could still be useful because maybe if you're playing non-PvE, like whatever your hero is that you're playing could be considered in your party. So, if you're playing, I guess you could only really use it with any of the light heroes because even though it does mention like Lexi and Briar on it, it's a light card, so you can only use it in a light deck. So you can only ever use it with Bolton or Prism. So I guess you could maybe use it to a lesser extent currently if they make rules about it. But all I know is I'm very excited, and I love the fact that there's like card mechanics now that are specifically designed for team play. Because we've had group hug cards before where it's like everyone kind of gets something. But they were more so for pit fight.
Yeah.
Or designed for pit fight. But this is clearly 100% designed for PvE. There's no doubts about it. So
Yeah. Or some kind of team-based kind of like format, right?
Yeah,
let's say it's like a 2v2 or 3v3 or something like that.
Yeah, which would be very cool.
It would be
for sure.
Very cool. And like, it also brought to light that, the Unity mechanic and all the other specializations, I believe they all say any number of heroes get the token. So
that's correct.
They're definitely bringing, initially you're like, oh, well, I guess you can kind of distribute them how you feel in UPF or whatever, but it really seems set up for whatever this is hinting at, which we don't know a lot about, but it's very exciting. I'm interested to see, somebody brought up, it might have even been Gary in the Discord, that like it is clearly one half of a piece of art, right? So I think everybody's really interested to see what the shadow side of whatever this card is. And it'll probably be Levia and Jane and, maybe Vincent or something like that.
Yeah, Viscera as well, perhaps.
Oh, Viscera,
I think just naming convention wise, we've got United We Stand, and then the next one would be Divided We Fall.
Yeah.
And that would be facing the other direction. So that way you could put the two cards together and it,
So cool.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't make that a pre-release or a buy box promo, because we did have for Monarch. In fact, the first time we learnt about talents were I think it was a pre-release promo. Yeah, it was a pre-release promo.
Mm-hmm.
It was Ray of Hope and Eclipse Existence. There was a light and a shadow instant spell, and that had artwork from that big sort of piece that we got from Monarch, where it was the angels versing the demons.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised they didn't do something like that for this card, because, let's face it, if you open up some Dusk Till Dawn and you get United We Stand, you're going to be like, what do I do with this? You've just wasted a majestic that, there's only so many majestics in a box, and one of them is this card that is completely useless. Yeah, it just seems like a feel bad, but
Well, hey, I will say, if the rules are, if you play it solo, and like, let's say you're playing Bolton, because you get the courage token off of it.
Yes.
Let's say the courage token is very good. Also, it is a popper for Bolton.
It is.
It's a 6 power. So I'm sure actually it will end up being somewhat playable. But yeah, I have to imagine we'll see something when they actually release whatever the product is. With the Divided We Fall and the United We Stand, it just makes a lot of sense. So we'll see. It's very interesting. It's very exciting. They're kind of really teasing us, as they always do, and
they love it.
Yeah, and like the whole storyline kind of coming to this point is so cool, and the realization of it is awesome. I'm sure it's been like a long time coming for them as well, right? Because I know like Monarch was one of the first sets they designed, and now we're kind of really getting to the thick of it and kind of really creating this like marquee moment in the story of Wraith that probably, I have to imagine, is going to set in motion every other crazy thing that happens in the game for the next couple sets, as we visit the other places. So very cool. Here's a quick question for you before we get to some listener questions.
Sure.
Bolton Levia, right? The two worst heroes from Monarch, as some people would say, they seem primed to have some really awesome parts in this story coming with Dusk Till Dawn. But most importantly, like they have the opportunity to get the most support in their class. Now, we saw some stuff for Bolton with the Biobox promo, and I think some promos for some other events. Basically, that say they're all banners, right?
Yes.
Bannerets. They're all bannerets, and if you charge them, you get some kind of benefit onto the next attack that you're attacking with. So, so we're already seeing that. So that could definitely come into the Bolton thing. Do you think Levi is going to get some kind of not a fix, but maybe some kind of new way to play her in this set.
You might be huffing copium. No.
Me? No, never.
No, for sure. I mean, could you imagine if they were like, Dusk Till Dawn, and you crack it open, it's like, oh, Light Warrior, Light Illusionist, Shadow Runeblade. That's it. No, they're definitely going to have something for you. I just know it. And if Alex does not give you a spoiler card, I'm going to have some stern words with him. Alex, if you're watching, give this man a spoiler. And also, just while I'm on this tangent, you're very close to 500 subs on YouTube. I want to see you in a Leviah cosplay. That has to happen. Come on, guys, subscribe.
Subscribe.
We're trying to you're listening to this on Spotify like I do all the time, you've got to go subscribe.
We're getting
do it
close.
Right now. You're not allowed to listen anymore to this podcast until you subscribe.
Yeah.
And that's a threat.
That's a threat. Oh, yeah, Kale said it. I mean, but no, I do appreciate that. But, I'm looking forward to Dusk Till Dawn. It's going to be a blast. I'm just excited to get something. Like, even if maybe the Shadow Brute cards are not, not the end all be all for the class, where they have to at least print some just shadow cards, some like non-class shadow cards, sure. And that'll be fun because hey, we had some really awesome just straight up shadow cards from Monarch, Shadow Puppetry, Ghostly Visit, stuff like that was playable. So. Pretty excited. Now we got some listener questions, and then we'll say our goodbyes till the next set, my friend. Are you ready?
Yes. What if I said no? Yeah. I know every time you ask these, you're like, "Are you ready?" And everyone says yes. I'm like, "What if I just said no?"
Yeah. All right. See ya. No.
I catch you guys. No. I'm of course I'm ready. Yeah.
The first question comes from William Knuckles, who runs the Table Pit's awesome UPF channel on YouTube. Who asks, is Thawne, Mara, and Yorick still traveling with Lexi, Oldham, and Briar?
I would also like to know this answer. I would assume not at this point. So I know when Lexi was first setting out and finding a bunch of these like ancient relics left over from the ancients that she did take with her a crew. But considering that in United We Stand, we don't see anyone else, I would assume that those folks are probably still in Aria. Whether they're cowards or just have other business to attend to, it seems like they're probably still in Aria. And essentially, Lexi, Briar, and Oldham just went to Everfest Carnival, found Bravo, and were like, all right, let's go. And let's get rid of this annoying bard. I'm sure old him probably was quite happy when they left him behind. Yeah,
definitely.
But I mean, there were some cool characters in there, but maybe we'll see them at some later point. Yeah. I don't think it's like LSS to come up with the basis of a character and then just drop it completely. But I'm not. It's funny. I think a lot of people almost see me as like an official spokesperson for lore for LSS. I know just as much as you guys. I just read into it. So,
well, you're the official Fresh and Buds expert for lore. Because, it's like, any question I have, I just shoot it off to you.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say shout out to the Table Pit. They've just recently put up an episode of Fabity, not to be confused with Jeopardy, where I did actually feature on that. I got to play in that. It was a lore-based game show where we were asked a bunch of questions, and it was a really fun time. Lots of funny jokes were made. Everyone go to the Table Pit and check out that video. I put it on my Twitter. So.
And there's another one coming out that I'll be a part of. That's called Fabby Feud. It's like Family Feud.
I did answer some questions as part of the survey for that.
Survey, so
if there's any stupid answers in there that you're like, what? Why is that an answer? It's probably from me.
It was a lot of fun. I don't know when it'll be up, but it was a good time. Gary and I did it.
Nice.
Now the next question. Well, next two questions comes from Greedy Capola, who likes to ask two questions. First of all, what's your favorite video game? And if you would replace the characters from the game with characters of Wraith, who would you cast to be in the game?
So I have two favorite video games, and it's not games per se, they're series. I don't know if that's cheating. For those of you who are watching video, good reason to. In my background here, some people might be able to see that is all Dark Souls board game expansions. I'm a massive Dark Souls, and just Soulsborne games in general fan. And my second favorite game series is called Stalker, which is a bit lesser known. I think a lot of people in the gaming sphere probably might not know of it. It's essentially a post-apocalyptic game set in the Chernobyl exclusion zone after the power plant exploded. And there's like mutants, and it's like a survival horror kind of type game. As for characters from Wraith that I could put into it, it's very hard because I think Dark Souls, any other characters really, they're like so unique that's very hard to place a character from Flesh and Blood onto them. I think it would be easier for me to just say like the main character of both the series. So for like Dark Souls character, like the Ashen One or the Chosen or whatever they're called, depending on the game, I'd probably say maybe Viscerai, because in all of these games, the central lore story reason behind you going and fighting all these bosses is to rekindle the flame to keep the age of like man going.
Mm-hmm.
But that is kind of forced upon you. It's all these higher powers, these godlike beings have kind of brainwashed people to, over time, like there'll be a new person that comes along and continues the flame. I feel like that's very reminiscent of Viscerai, where they don't get a choice in what they do. And when you think you have a choice and you think you're doing the right thing, you're still under the thumb of someone else. It's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, you know? So it's kind of that struggle between like personal freedom and doing what's right, which I feel like really resonates with Viscerai. In terms of Stalker, I'll quickly recap the main character. So the main character of Stalker is called Strelok. He is the person you play as in the first game, but he also comes up throughout the other games as well. Essentially, he's this character that he ventured into the zone, and there's like this organization that's at the center of the zone that doesn't want to be known. So anyone that gets too close, they basically brainwash them, or they do some weird mind control stuff to them, and they send them back out into the outskirts of the zone, and they give them a mission to go do something. So normally they're contracted to go kill a person. And Strelok in particular, when he got sent back out and, you know, consequently sort of woke up again and came out of his stupor, his mission, he didn't know his name at the time, but his mission was to kill himself.
Oh, God.
So this entire game, spoiler alert for Stalker, the first game. It came out in 2007, all right? Give me a break. So the main story for the first game is that you don't know who you are, and you're chasing in the footsteps of someone called Strelok. But this entire time, as you go further and further into the zone, you're chasing your own footsteps, and you don't even know it. And I feel like that's very reminiscent a little bit of Icelander, because Icelander has amnesia, and she was traveling to Volcor to find out like who she was. And then when she got to Volcor, she found out kind of that she's from Volcor, but she just had this longing to go to Volcor for some reason. And she just traveled through Aria from the Bleak Expanse all the way to Volcor. So I think that's very reminiscent of the Strelok character, but both are fantastic video games. Highly recommend them to everyone. They can be a little bit tough and challenging, but you know, it makes it more exciting when you beat it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Greedy Capullo's second question here is,
of course,
Mr. Gottlieb hinted at a unknown region when he was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And do you have any speculation on what that might mean?
There's only two things I can think of. Oh, maybe three. Okay, I'm going to throw three theories out.
Sure.
So I'm going to do least juiciest to most crazy. So I think the region that he might be referring to could be whatever is west of the Savage Lands. because the map does cut off just randomly at the edge of the Savage Lands, and we don't know what's to the west, which I think if they wanted the entire world, it's weird. So they call it the World of Wraith, but in the lore, they specifically say that humans came from elsewhere, implying other continents, and settled on Wraith. So perhaps it could be the extra bit to the side of the Savage Lands to the west, or it could be a whole other continent, which would be wild because the game is very heavily focused on 8 regions. So to go outside of that is quite, it's them straying a lot from the norm. But it is possible. My second guess is on the map of Wraith, there is to the northwest in the ocean, there is this depiction of this spiraling whirlpool that has teeth or something on it. It could be that, or it could just be some sort of island around Wraith in general. It could just be like a series of islands. I think that if that whirlpool thing on the map is like, if it actually is something and it's not just there for design on the map, that could be the abyssal depths that we've heard of on cards like Quiver of the Abyssal Depths. Because that is very sea themed, obviously. And then my juiciest theory is that Eorathiel is not the only alternate dimension. So the reason I think this is because I see a lot of similarities between Wraith and Eorathiel as to, in D&D, the material plane and the Shadowfell. But in D&D, there's not only a shadow reflection of the world, but there's also it's not necessarily light, but it's called the Feywild. And that's more of the Feywild is where emotions run rampant, and the Shadowfell is where emotions are dulled. And then the in-between is where you have the material plane. I think the Shadow of Aesir, the Aesir of Shadow, lives in Eorathiel, and Sol, the Aesir of Light, lives in a light dimension. And this is where Prism is getting the angels from. That is my theory. And I think maybe we will see some of the heroes travel into that. We might even get a set for that. That could be the third set in the Monarch, sort of War of the Monarch series. Yeah. Where they go into there. Maybe I think the War of the Monarch is not going to go in favor of Solana. I think a lot of stuff is going to get messed up. And perhaps Chain and the forces of the Demonastery break into the realm of Sol. I think that's a possibility. So I do also think that maybe, because there's also mention of this in the lore recap article that came out recently, that the divide between Eorathiel and Wraith is like closing. The gap is closing. We might have Eorathiel overlap Wraith. So both worlds exist in the same spot at the same time, and that would be pure pandemonium. I mean, they do say that the effects of these 12 hours, dusk till dawn, will change Wraith forever. And I think maybe that's what it is. It will be wild if that happens, because that will be such a blow to the story, and we won't know what's happening next. But yeah, that's my theory as to where we could go from here.
So, the natural progression of like a trilogy, right? Empire Strikes Back. This is the Empire Strikes Back. Like something so crazy that our main characters here are like, what are we gonna do? So they get the chance for redemption in the third one. So next question comes, and this is kind of in tandem. Comes from Crixus, who asks, are there any areas of Wraith where you think the lore is really lacking, and do you think that's intentional? So we will speculate more.
Yeah, it's definitely intentional. I mean, I think that's fairly obvious from the way that they're releasing sets, that we're kind of having sets go one by one through all the regions. I think I'd said this before. I've actually just recently gone back and listened to older episodes of this podcast that I've been on. And I remember talking about how I felt like LSS was doing a very good job at like pacing themselves in terms of releasing lore, because it would be nowhere near as hype if they were like, oh, here's the Aesir.
Yeah.
And
here's
this
everything.
is what they are.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's everything, I guess outside of that, because I could easily just say Savage Lands or Mysteria or Metrics because we haven't been to them yet. But I think outside of that, I kind of want to know a little bit more about areas that lie on the outskirts of the major regions. So, for example, the Northern Realms, which is still a part of Solana as a region, but it is not a part of Solana, the city. Same as the deserts around Volcor. We did get sort of glimpses of them, like the Sandakai, the Red Desert, things like that. I'd like more expansion on areas that are not the central focus of a region. So, areas in Aria like the Bleak Expanse, which, Korshem is kind of the central point of Aria, but the Bleak Expanse and the Thunder Steps and Mount Eisenloft and all that thing, I just really think it would help flesh the world out a bit more, because at the moment it definitely just seems like one city, metrics, one city Solana, So I'd like to see that, but I think in due time we'll eventually get that. It's a lot that they have to get through, and we can't have it all at once, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to.
Yeah, so. It feels like they're putting out the kind of framework, and then they'll fill in the gaps from there. I think that makes the most sense. Like, at least that's how I would approach it. Now, next question comes from Mr. Viz, aka Gary. Predictions for Viserai specialization, and how about chain?
Okay, so I'm going to start with chain. I think it's very weird that they do not have anything written about chain at the moment, because every other character, including like a hero that was, I guess, a minor character up until now, Shiana, is included in the Dusk Till Dawn story. What the hell is Chain doing? He must be doing something. I have a feeling we might get a Starvo type card for Chain.
Oh, gosh.
Where, when I say Starvo treatment, I mean like a new version. So I guess Prism kind of got the Starvo treatment, because Starvo was the first time we got a repeat of a hero character just on a different hero card. That would be really cool. But that's probably just a bit wishful thinking for me. I just want to know what he is doing, because he can't just be sitting around. He is the mastermind to an extent behind this entire attack. He must be doing something. Whether he's trying to, I don't know, find another Embra that we haven't seen before, try and make a pact with another. I don't know how that would go down, but but yeah. So that's my thoughts on Chain. As for Viserai, in terms of specialization, I don't know gameplay-wise what it would be. I don't know, I think it might be a bit too strong if they did something where it's like a non-attack action, where if you've played a non-attack and an attack, you create 4 rune chance, but you destroy them at the end of the turn. I think that'd be a bit too strong if they did that. Oh, wait a minute.
Wait. No, actually, that's not strong enough. They want it available to all the rune blades, not even just Viserai.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Jokes aside, I guess I don't think my idea for this would be a good specialization. I think it would make more sense as a hero card. If we were to get another printing of Viserai, I just want it to be called Viserai Homecoming, and Viserai returns to Volcor. That is all I want, because that's where he's from, And I've had this speculation for a while now. I'm not sure if I talked about it on the podcast, but I've had this speculation that when Lord Sutcliffe named Viserai, he did use Volcor naming conventions for the name. That was confirmed in an article they did when Uprising came out, and they discussed the naming conventions, and they put Viserai was a Volkai name. So Volkai names have to use the letters A and I, or the sound I, at the end of their name to denote the fact that they are lower class. But Lord Sutcliffe does not know anything about Viserai's background, unless Viserai has told him, and I don't think that would have happened. So he was just assuming that Viserai was Volkai. But the fact that Viserai had some sort of latent Aether affinity leads me to believe that he was a Drakai, a noble. And I think if we do get Viserai with a talent, he's going to be a Draconic Runeblade. And that would be I can't even like state just how hyped that would make me. I would be running around my house if I ever saw that, just screaming like a little schoolgirl. That'd be awesome. So like, I'm just imagining like Draconic Runeblade, Viserai, Homecoming, and he's like wearing his sick armor. He's in Volcor, just seeing this destruction around him, and he's taking his helmet off, and he's just badass. That'd just be awesome. But in terms of specialization, like actual card, I don't know, something that makes rune chance. I mean, what else?
That makes the most sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of if he becomes the Draconic Runeblade, all that purple is going to turn to red, and I don't know if all the purple lovers out there are going to be so happy. So we'll see. We'll see. Now, this kind of goes in tandem with like, well, what's Chain doing? Sigma asks, will Leviah betray Chain and kill him, planning to let Blasmafet wander wraith eating every living, blood-flowing flesh being?
So I was looking at the lore again, just to refresh myself. When Chain did come across Leviah, Chain was a bit of a meanie and kind of forcefully controlled Leviah to force her to submit to him, but then kind of convinced her like, hey, like, just come along with me, come along and destroy Solana and destroy the light. But I could definitely see that Leviah, the whole thing with the Leviah story, if you were to boil it down to like a sentence or a phrase, is longing for personal freedom, because she grew up as a slave to Lady Barthamot, and then now she has kind of made herself a slave to Blasmafet, and then has also made herself a slave in a way to Chain. So whether or not she would betray him, I could see a betrayal, probably not a killing. I think Chain and Leviah are, I guess, in terms of like lore, they're probably very similar in power. I mean, they both have a pact with an Emperor, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be Blasmafet versus Ursa at that point. But I could see her maybe striking out on her own. It's hard because we really don't know her motivations past the fact that she just wants to be free. But she's kind of bound herself to this contract now. So, you know, I don't think she would probably willingly let Blasmafet just wander wraith, but Blasmafet's probably going to be like, you're going to do that for me because I'm forcing you to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, certainly probably getting hungry, right? And just want to say, come on, like, let's go. Let's get out there. And then our final question here comes from on Twitter, Mike from Blockout Party. Is there any reason to be sympathetic towards the Demonastery and critical of Solana?
This has been a big topic and subject amongst the community ever since the War of the Monarchs sort of started and we learnt what it was. It really comes down to just personal perception, right? So I think in terms of storytelling, the best villains are ones that you can sympathize with, because it's not just, I'm evil, I hate everyone, blah, 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 I'm going to kill you all, you know? The best villains, for example, you know, the Joker from Batman, you know, you can kind of feel sympathetic towards him. I don't know much about his backstory, but you can see glimmers of humanity amongst the chaos, or like Thanos, for example, in Marvel. His entire goal, from what I understand, I don't watch superhero movies, but my understanding of Thanos' goal was the universe was becoming overcrowded, resources were being depleted, and to save the universe, he had to delete half of it. On the surface level, like logically speaking, yeah, probably the best thing to do, you know? Yeah. You know, if planet Earth here starts becoming overcrowded, the first thing we're probably going to do is, you know, instead of not wasting resources, we're probably going to be like what China does, like one-child policy, you know? Yeah. We're going to cut back on the amount of people that can be born so that way we don't overpopulate. But that's not really an ethical thing to do. So, it's a matter of perspective. I can definitely see that their motives are, they have good intentions, but like the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily think wiping out entire cities and killing a bunch of people to stop Asia is particularly the way to go about it. It's a very cut and dry solution to something that they might have other options at their disposal, but they just don't realize it. And I guess another factor to this is because I obviously just explained why the monastery might be good, but as to why Solana is bad, we've seen throughout history that the suppression of knowledge is not a good thing. Like, for example, the Dark Ages, hundreds of thousands of books full of knowledge were burnt and destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
We could have made we could be in, I guess, in more of flying cars. We're kind of getting to that point, but like we could have already been in flying cars is what I'm saying, if we had all that information. And we've seen like governments, like specifically, let's just say World War II, the Germans, anything that went against what they believed in, immediately you go to jail. The burning books, just anything that they just didn't want people researching what they were about, because they knew that if people found out, they would realize how truly unethical the things they were doing are. And that's definitely the vibe I'm getting with Solana. It's religious zealotry gone to the extreme.
Yes.
We see that in real life as well. Faith itself is not harmful, but religion can be. And in Solana's case, that is definitely the case. I mean, they obviously have something they want to hide.
Yeah.
And we don't exactly know what it is they want to hide, but they definitely condemn anyone that tries to look into it. And that's not a good thing. Knowledge is, I guess my personal philosophy is, knowledge is something that should not be suppressed.
Yeah.
And that's the only way humanity can really progress, is if we have knowledge. And suppressing it just really sends us back to the Dark Ages, really.
Yeah.
So that's why I think Solana is bad. And I mean, we even kind of saw it in Shiana's story, where she kind of gets brainwashed by the council as well. That's definitely not good.
No.
She's lost her free will, They're keeping birds in a cage at this point. Yeah.
And kind of to bring, I mean, this is a great question to kind of end on, right? Like to bring the whole story full circle. The monastery is very much a monster that they created themselves, right? Through this kind of rigid, basically fat world they had created, where you can't think anything other than what they think. So you're bound to have rebellion, and the rebellion ended up bringing about this like really powerful force that is the monastery. That's now an issue for them. It's like it's tale as old as time. You go you go try to get oil somewhere, and all of a sudden the people that live there are not so happy, and then they want to attack you later. So hey, it happens in real life, it happens in the world of Wraith. So hey, it is what it is. But this is a great show, Kale. As always, I had a blast with you, my friend. I always love chatting with you. Thank you for your time, and please plug anything you'd like to plug.
Yeah, so obviously my YouTube channel, DeadSummer Art, I am very close to 1,000 subscribers. I'm about 30 subscribers away as of the recording of this. So yeah, if you want, I'm not going to force people to. I don't like to be the person that's like, hey guys, before the video, like and subscribe. I don't like doing that stuff, but I did make a little push for subscribers. I was like, hey, check out my latest spoiler video. When that came out, I felt like it didn't get as many views as previous, so I put it out, and I was like, hey, come watch it, please. I spent a lot of time on it, and that actually helped. So I need to put myself out there a bit more. But yeah, YouTube, DeadSummer Art, Twitter, DeadSummer Art. I'm DeadSummer Art everywhere. On Twitter, you'll find me rambling about stuff, getting hyped over new cards, etc., etc. I've got the Eternal Oracles Discord, which you can find links for on my socials. We're starting to get some more conversation going in there, which is good. I didn't have too much time to sort of, keep it flowing recently, but we've had some new people join, and they've been asking questions, and we've been getting some good discussions in there. We've just recently been talking about War of the Monarchs and the the best order to read all the stories in, and then the day after I had posted that in the Discord, LSS went and did it themselves. So, otherwise expect more content coming out. My latest video was a remaster of my very first video, which is an overview of Wraith in general. So if you want to get a general sense for the lore and what the world is like, go watch that. It's going to be a multi-part series where I do a video for each region, and those videos are going to be pretty long. So far, I've only fully written out the Solana one, and that one is pretty long. I could imagine the video is maybe like over 10 minutes.
Yeah.
maybe to 20. But it dives into every single bit of every single region and everything we know. And then I guess outside of that, obviously got this D&D game coming up. That should be up very soon. Part 1's been recorded. We've got to record part 2, but we're very keen to get that out, and that's a lot of fun as well. So,
will that be out on your channel, or
that
their
will
channel?
be coming out on Red Zone Rogue, which is where all the Living Legends stuff comes out. But I would like to do some YouTube shorts and have little clip segments of like funny parts, like for example, Bill's character hiding underneath some fabric at the start of combat. So I've got some more content coming out, and then I guess as of the recording of this, I don't know if I'm getting a spoiler for Dusk Till Dawn. No one else I've talked to has got a spoiler yet, so I don't know if I'm going to be getting one. But if I am, you'll hear about it on my Twitter, and I'll be spending the next 2 weeks working on that. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, looking forward to it, and please check out all of DeadSummer Art. Just check it all out, and then look for the D&D thing. I'm pretty excited to watch that. I just love it.
It's good.
D&D is so much fun. I just love watching it. Now, you all can continue to find me on Twitter at FreshBudsPod. It's a great place to see me post memes and then also keep people updated on the podcast. Another great place to hang out is the Buds Discord, which you should check out. It's all in the show notes in the link tree below. Check out the Patreon and YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Do all that fun stuff. It helps. And, we're close to 500 subscribers, as Kale said. And, and then I'll have to put tentacles on my head. And I can't wait. It's so much fun now. We always like to end the show talking about food. What's some food you've been enjoying?
Yeah, so every time I come on, I always try to think, what's something new and interesting I can talk about? I'm one of those people that I don't eat like many new foods often. I've always grown up being very picky. But over the years, as I've grown up and become more mature, I've expanded my taste buds. Something I guess I can talk about, because I'm going to have it for dinner as soon as we finish this. About a year ago, I tried for the first time butter chicken.
Ooh, yeah.
And oh man, butter chicken. So I've tried both just the frozen meal from the store, and I've also tried butter chicken from like an actual Indian restaurant. And while it is much better at a restaurant, the price that I pay, I'm like, I'm fine with just the cheaper stuff. It's still pretty good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like just naan bread as well with that. Oh my god. I put I don't know if this is blasphemy. I put a little bit of butter on my toasted naan.
I don't think that's too crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if that's blasphemy or not, but yeah, it's just some good naan bread and some butter chicken. Oh boy, that's
I mean, that's just
I know.
Straight comfort food right there. It sounds so good.
It's probably the whitest thing I've ever said. That's typical white person stuff in like butter chicken. Wow.
yeah. Well, we'll get you eating some little crazier stuff, by the time next set comes around. How about that?
Yeah. Give me some suggestions. I'll have to try some stuff. So.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we had a blast today. I hope everybody enjoyed that. I can't wait. Dusk Till Dawn, the hype is so real. I don't think we have time to get to Charmer today, but that's okay. We'll get to him next week. But everybody,
Sorry, Charmer.
have a good weekend and talk to you soon.